boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
You just mentioned it a moment ago. It's the one fight that keeps on being talked about in conjunction with you. And I know it's a fight that you want, which is the fight with Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde was in the studio with me and Spencer a few months ago. Let's listen to what Anthony said during that conversation.
I've said it openly, you know, different promoters can approach me. I've spoken to Buatsi personally. So as Tunde said, you're the friend of the friend. You're a third party. You're hearing what other people are saying. For me, there's no reason this fight cannot be made. Right,
Josh. I think in that clip, it talks about the fight being made, but it doesn't show the bit where he, I think, attributes the fact that it's down to your end. You don't want this fight. I don't agree with that, and I said to him at the time I don't agree with it because I know the discussions that were going on. Do you want this fight, and does this fight happen in 2025?
I hope it happens this year. I saw Yarde, I think, on the weekend, and I said to him, you should always do what you're going to do because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what I have to do, which is to keep active, to have these guaranteed fights and purses that are available to myself. I said, in the meantime, do what you're doing. I hope I definitely see you down the road and I hope that happens, but there's no way I'm going to hit a pause button to make sure someone gets their stuff sorted out. No way. I'm going to always do what I'm doing. And like I said, after the Aziz fight, all these things came out about him and Warren. Cool, sort that out. But in the interim, I'm going to do what I'm doing.
Do you want this fight, or does it matter to you whether you fight Anthony Yarde? Does it matter to you that you beat Callum Smith, you got a world title shot more importantly?
That's the route that matters to me. Beat Smith, fight for a world title. My career and what I do is not based on fighting Anthony Yarde.
No.
It's at the end of it, I want to say, guys,
but it's a fight that gets,
I want a world
the economics
title.
of it are right though, aren't they, potentially?
It's true, but in the interim as well, I have to keep fighting these good guys and I have to remember the goal. When I turned pro, Simon, it wasn't to fight Yarde. And
no, of course, it was to win a world title.
Exactly, so if I'm getting closer to that, I'm going to keep stepping closer to that.
There's no way Buatsi should be waiting for Anthony Yarde to sort out his promotional situation or anything. You know, like, no disrespect to Anthony Yarde. He's not a world champion. People want to talk about A-side, B-side splits. Buatsi is an interim champion, which puts him in line to fight for the higher tier belt with the sanctioning body. This is a fight that should have happened a few years back. Buatsi's got no business waiting for Anthony Yarde. If a fight is presented with Callum Smith, a popular British fighter from the Smith family, a popular fighting family, signed to Matchroom, former super middleweight champion of the world, in Riyadh season, you take your fight. If by the end of Joshua Buatsi's career, he has Anthony Yarde on his resume, all well and good, but he's got to run through smoothly and not obstruct Joshua Buatsi's career goals. You know, I'm neutral between Buatsi and Yarde. I'm neutral on support. And the facts are, Buatsi is ranked very high with all the sanctioning bodies right now. And I would argue a Callum Smith victory is bigger than anything Yarde has achieved in his career. If they revisit negotiations, any talk from Tunde or Yarde about where the A-side, Buatsi should move on and get on with what he's doing. No arguments, no vexation, no hard feelings. You know, and I'm just being objective, working with the information that the public are privy to. No more than that. I'm not an insider. Yeah? Basic deduction skills. That fight was presented to Buatsi and to Yarde by their promoters, Ben Shalom and Frank Warren. 50-50 split. Yarde would get the pay-per-view revenue that TNT generate, and Buatsi would get the pay-per-view revenue that Sky Sports generate. Seems fair to me. Then the dispute with the matching rights between Tunde Yarde versus Frank started. The fight never happened. Months later, they announced that they're out of their contract situation with Queensberry and Frank Warren, and they tell us, well, Yarde tells us, I'm open to work with all promoters. Eddie Hearn, Ben Shalom, Frank Warren. Well, if that's the case then, why didn't you just have the last fight with Frank against Buatsi rather than debating over how much fights are left on your contract? Because neither Buatsi or Yarde have become world champions yet. We've had a few light heavyweights showing potential, but they haven't delivered. We haven't delivered full world titles since Nathan Cleverly. When was that? Around 11 years ago. It's time for Yarde to focus on what he needs to do away from Buatsi. And if that fight happens, it's going to have to be organic. It's going to have to be a case where egos do not hinder the process of making the fight, because there's other good fights out there for both of them. Buatsi's got a very good fight on February the 22nd. One he's not guaranteed to win. And Yarde needs to get himself in similar situations. Some people are saying the Lyndon Arthur fight is not a good fight. Of course it's a good fight. It's a rubber match. And yes, we expect Yarde to win, but who else is he going to fight right now? You can import someone over in the top 15, but Lyndon's good to go. And I heard Tunde and Pat Barrett basically agreeing to the fight just the other week. Why is the momentum went cold? Hopefully it's still going to happen. Lyndon beat Liam Cameron, who everyone's raving about right now, on the strength of his performance against Ben Whittaker. Why not?
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
We're trying to make a fight with MBILLI. I got the email to make that fight a mandatory, to make it a title eliminator. I talked to my team, and that same day we signed those papers and sent them back. And after that, we never heard again from MBILLI's team.
MBILLI, 28 wins, no defeats, 23 inside the distance, lost his pen. So Diego Pacheco, 22-0, 18 inside the distance, only 23 years of age. He takes on Steve Nelson this Saturday, who is 20-0, 16 inside the distance, 36 years of age. So he doesn't have a lot of fights in terms of experience, but him being trained by Bo Mack, Terence Crawford in that camp, he'll have a few tricks in there, and Diego Pacheco's got to stay focused. This fight isn't a joke. I've watched Steve Nelson fight a few times. He's tough, and he and Bo Mack will believe they can win this fight. Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas this Saturday. Live on DAZN, Matchroom Boxing. On the undercard, Andy Cruz has got a very good test against Salcido. Andy's only had 4 fights, 4 wins. His opponent has got 20 wins, 1 loss. An IBF International 135-pound title fight. And the likes of Andy Cruz could be closing in on a Gervonta Davis fight. Pacheco could soon find himself mandated to fight Canelo, so there's a lot at stake. It's a very good card.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
I've known about him for 2 years around the European scene. Former European champion himself. He's a solid opponent. 2 defeats on his record. More fights than me.
16-0, 12 inside the distance. That's Dalton Smith talking about his opponent this Saturday, WALID OUIZZA from France, 33 years of age, 19 wins, 8 inside the distance, 2 losses, both the losses on points. OUIZZA, I looked at some highlights. He's got a nice high guard. He's not afraid to stand in the pocket and hook with his opponent. Decent technique, solid. His knockout record doesn't attest to a big puncher. But, he's a former European champion. He didn't lose the belt in the ring. And he shouldn't be a pushover by any means. But Dalton Smith, barring the scar tissue around his eyes, should take the European title this Saturday. He should take it. I've heard a few people say Dalton Smith ain't all that. But Dalton is a very good fighter, actually. And, aside from the scar tissue, he shouldn't be underestimated. He's very good. He sits down very well in his punches and has improved quite a bit in recent years with his dad Grant Smith, ranked number 13 with the IBF, number 2 with the WBC, number 12 with the WBO. There'll be no shortage of fights for Dalton Smith, with the likes of Jack Catterall fighting an eliminator against, not an eliminator, for the interim WBO title against Barboza in Manchester in February. Richardson Hitchens, he's got a scrap there at Matchroom, and they've got a whole load of contenders at 140 at Matchroom. So a lot to play for Dalton Smith this year. Potential world title fight maybe later on this year, early 2026. OUIZZA, like I say, not a big puncher, but he's got quick hands, throws a lot of punches, works off the jab. He's not wild or anything like that. So Dalton might have to get his timing down to land the type of body shots he did against Cepeda.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
They didn't disclose what the injury was, why Isaac Chamberlain has had to pull out of his English title defence at cruiser against Vidal Riley. Isaac, 16 wins, 3 losses, 8 inside the distance. But Isaac, he's 30 years of age, which is relatively young. But he's had some tough fights, Billion Smith broke his eye socket. I remember him fighting Wally Camacho at the York Hall years back, dislocating his shoulder. Very tough fight last year, losing fight against Jack Massey at Crystal Palace. Had the clutch fest against Lawrence Okoli 6 years back at the O2. He was down a couple of times and was roughed up pretty bad in what was an ugly fight. The Luke Watkins fight after the Okoli fight was tough, touch and go until Isaac scored a knockdown late on in the fight. Isaac has a very good chin. He's tough. He's game. He doesn't back down from a challenge. And he's had a tough career. And it's one of the reasons I picked Vidal Riley to upset Isaac. Wear and tear is a real thing. And I'm not saying that because he got injured. Anyone can get injured. But the older fighters get, with tough careers, withdrawals are just more likely. I was looking forward to that fight. Vidal Riley, 12-0, 7 inside the distance. He'll be disappointed. He'll be expected to stay on the card. They'll have to find a replacement on February the 1st, where Adam Azim headlines against Sergei Lipinets. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't picking Vidal to blow Isaac out the water. I expect a competitive 10-rounder. But I thought it was a fight Vidal could have edged out. They may revisit it later on down the year. Hopefully they will. It's a good fight.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
I'm massively against rehydration clauses. At the end of the day, we have weight divisions for a reason. I think rehydration clauses make things more dangerous than they necessarily need to be.
Don't disagree with you.
If you are making a fight at 160, you should not be disabling a fighter and saying, well, you can't rehydrate beyond this weight the day after. At the end of the day, we want them to rehydrate as much as they possibly can. If they can make the contracted weight of 160 on the day of the weigh-in, so be it. It's your choice. You are making the choice to go up in weight. Don't give me this that you're the smaller guy, 147 going up to 160. We need a little bit of something coming back the other way. Tough. You've made the decision to go to 160. Crack on. These are the rules at 160. I completely am against rehydration clauses because I think it brings danger towards Chris Eubank Jr.
Let's deal with this point.
You are making the choice to go up in weight. Don't give me this that you're the smaller guy, 147 going up to 160. We need a little bit of something coming back the other way. Tough.
Conor Benn is making the choice to go up in weight. But isn't Chris making the choice to fight a career welterweight? Although Conor's last 2 fights have been at 150 plus, but that's because he hasn't been in full training mode. Rehydration clauses in title fights, I can understand the argument against that. But this isn't that. This is a non-title fight. They can basically have the fight at 156, 155, 154 without coming into conflict in compromising championship weight limits.
These are the rules at 160.
These are the rules at 160 if it's a title fight. It's a non-title fight. The last fight, which got scuppered because of you-know-what, was contracted at 157. So this is a better compromise for Chris than having to emaciate himself down to 157. The rehydration weight limit on this fight is said to be in compliance with the IBF's rehydration clause. And it's a piece of piss for Chris, really, and he knows it, right? He ain't going to weigh more than 170 by morning anyway. For some fighters, depending on their body type and how they train, it could be more of an issue. But Adam Catterall is approaching the topic like it's a title fight. It's not a title fight. If it was a title fight and Conor weighed in at 153, he wouldn't be eligible to contest the fight. He'd have to be over 154. No title on the line. You can add all your clauses as you please. You know, there's a rematch clause, rehydration clause. There's no purse bid because it's not a title fight. It's not an eliminator. So the champion doesn't get an automatic higher percentage of the split. The compromise was Chris got 55% of the purse. And Conor got a little compromise on the rehydration clause. It's no big deal, especially for how much Chris is getting paid. Terence Crawford is moving from 154 to 168, but he's fighting Canelo, where you don't get much leeway in terms of concessions. He's accepted this fight with no rehydration clause, apparently. I guess he really fancies his chances. If Canelo folds him up easy, people will complain Canelo's bullying the smaller guy, but it was Crawford who asked for the fight. Floyd Schofield Sr. is convinced that Shakur Stevenson and his people convinced the WBC to put a 13.5 pound rehydration clause on his son for their February the 22nd challenge for Shakur's WBC title. Shakur said he didn't do nothing of the sort. It was the WBC's decision. Shakur used more colourful language than that. Is this a new regulation, or have they just singled out this fight to put a rehydration clause on it?
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
Got to say this, and I'm going to try and lay off the Dennis McCann stories for a little while. But August 2023, Dennis struggled and got a gift technical draw after an accidental head clash in round 9 against Ionut Baluta, a Romanian super bantamweight based in the UK. Baluta outstrengthed Dennis, outworked him, and should have got the decision. He hurt Dennis a couple of times. The fight ended with Dennis bleeding pretty bad from the head clash. And then the rematch A year later, on a Chisora Joyce undercard, it was a near shutout in McCann's favour. And at the time, I didn't think nothing of it. I said, man, he's made some serious improvements. But this time, Baluta couldn't push him back at all and was beaten easily. Easily. And Dennis just looked a lot stronger. And in hindsight, of him popping for them 2 steroids before the Peter McGrail fight that was scheduled for the 21st of December last year on the Usyk Fury undercard.
I don't know what else to say.
I don't know what to say. Well, I do, but I'll just leave it to the imagination.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.